Today we're talking about compression again, but like a bit different though. Hey, welcome to Jam House Studios. I'm Sam. Let's jump straight into it. Here I have a snare signal from a live recording from Swellfest 2018. I've just nabbed a snippet of a snare drum here. So let's have a bit of a listen to just this signal on its own. All right, so that already sounds pretty good on its own. Obviously, since it's been recorded through a desk, it has like a live mixing desk. It's likely to already have some bits and pieces on it, like a bit of EQ and all that good sort of gear. If we wanted to compress a snare drum or vocals or kicks or whatever, the way that we would normally go about it would be something like this. We would go onto the insert channel here, grab a plug-in. If we are looking at a snare channel, we'd probably put on something like a 76, I think, CLA 76, especially the Bluey for its mid-range, and we would probably do something like this, right? Something along these lines. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Okay, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. We could even compress it a bit harder and have a listen to this. Notice when we compress a bit harder, we can sometimes squeeze all of the life out of it. Now, the thing is that we might really enjoy the tone that's coming through with that particular instrument, especially vocals, and we might like a bit of the squashed sound, but we also want to preserve the dynamics. Now, some compressors these days, when you're a bit lucky, can have a wet-dry mix. What I'm going to show you guys today is essentially a separate option for how we can go about routing and doing a bit of parallel compression. So I'm going to keep this plugin on here because I quite like that slammed snare sound standalone. Let's listen to it once more. And of course, like I said, nothing else has been processed here. You know, it's all nice and straightforward. I'm also just going to quickly rename that to just snare instead of vocal. I was planning on doing a vocal, but here we are. So what I'm going to do now, there are, you know, the old saying is there are a million ways to skin a cat, you know. With this one, there are a million ways that we can go about doing this particular method of parallel compression. What I'm about to show you is my favorite way. Okay, so the way I'm going to go about it is I'm going to duplicate this track, and then over here we'll see we'll see our track over here. Okay, and we just want to have the one duplicate. Okay, so now you should see we have snare and snare dub one. And what I'm going to do is change this to snare comp. Okay, and then over here I'm going to get rid of the 76 off of this channel. So here we have our completely raw snare sound. So again, here it's got a nice bit of dynamic sound in there, and then over here we have the compressed snare. Right, and very different tones, and obviously very different sounds overall, with the compressed signal being a lot more slammed. What we're going to have a look at now is how we go about blending these signals. Okay, And we're going to assume this is part of a larger mix, okay? I don't think I feel comfortable, obviously, having the rest of the stems and stuff in here for copyright reasons and all of that good sort of gear. But nevertheless, what I'm going to open up here is I'm going to create a new track. I'm going to create one new mono audio track, okay? No, I'm not. I'm going to create... oh, sorry, I'm used to some different DAWs at the moment. Going to create an auxiliary input, okay? I'm going to call this snare mix, okay? Snare mix. So we're going to get into the habit of essentially using some master mixes. We can see this is a different color. Ordinarily, I'd use a different shade of blue to keep things nice and consistent, okay? So what I have now up here is this master channel of sorts, and then our raw channel, and then our compressed channel, okay? Now, I'm going to route this input to a bus, and for argument's sake, I'm going to just use bus 1, all right? Now, you might think that the way to go about this is to use a send, but that's not correct in these circumstances, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to route the actual output of this to bus 1, all right? And then same for our compressed signal, okay? And so now we'll have both the signals, and I'm going to demonstrate that by having them both muted, and then I'm going to unmute them one at a time. All right. Now, this is the best way that I've found, processing and organizing, because it gives you the most flexibility with adjusting volumes and all that sort of gear. Okay. So what we can do now is have our compressed snare signal. Okay. We can choose a level so we know that overall our raw snare signal. Let's see what that peaks at. So I'm just going to set that back to 0, going to mute this one here, and let's see what our raw snare signal peaks at. So negative 4.4, the first two hits aren't louder than that, are they? Nah, 4.4, so. Okay, so our last hit is negative 4.4. So let's try to not go above that necessarily. So we've got our snare mix, and I'm going to lead in with my compressed signal and see if we can hover a bit below the negative 4.4. Okay, so there we go. So we are well below the threshold there. But notice when we have that signal, just the compressed, it sounds quite compressed, for lack of a better term, really. It hasn't got many dynamics. It's really squashed. And, unless you're trying to be Tame Impala, it's not super suitable for a mix of just having that standalone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some of our raw snare signal and try and make sure that we have some of those dynamics retained. There we go. So you can see how we get that little volume jump up there now. So without our raw snare signal, what's our peak come to? Should be, that says negative 6.2, but it'll be a bit lower than that. Yep, negative 9.5. Doesn't get above negative 9.5. Now let's bring in our raw snare signal. So let's see how much higher we get from there. Already 1 decibel higher, negative 8.5. Negative 8.5, negative 8.6. Let's bring a little bit more of it in and get a bit more of those dynamics retained. Negative 7.2. Look at that, negative 6.4. So you can really have both the punchiness of the compressed signal and the dynamics retained using this method, okay? And like I said, there are a heap of different ways that you can go about doing this routing to make it suit depending on your instrument and all of that sort of stuff. Using sends instead of your master buses and that sort of stuff. But this also gives you the flexibility to just demonstrate here of if your snare overall is too loud within your mix, you can bring it right down here like this without having to stuff around with the individual send volume controls or these volume and gain controls here. You can literally just drag this one fader down and you've got the lot controlled. So yeah, there you go. There's basic parallel compression on a snare signal. I hope you got something out of this video. Tune in the next fortnight for our next tips and tricks video. Catch you later.